Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well today. In this video, we are going to be looking at why Star Citizen is taking so long to develop and why you don't need to worry too much about the future. Before we get started, if you're liking the content, feel free to subscribe. I have channel memberships open if you'd like to go the extra mile, and I have a link to the community Discord down below. I would love to have you there. Without further ado, though, let's discuss the real reasons why Star Citizen is taking so long to make. Now, there are plenty of reasons we can infer for Star Citizen's extremely long dev time. This can include neglect, scope creep, lack of structure, and an assortment of other issues. But the big and most obvious reason for Star Citizen's lengthy development actually comes from another game, that being Squadron 42. Now, to many, this doesn't necessarily come to us as a surprise. Squadron 42 has seemingly been through the ringer just as much as Star Citizen, but there's such a massive difference between these two products. One of them aims to be the most immersive, groundbreaking MMO of all time, featuring insane technology that will provide features, systems, and gameplay only one could dream of. And then one of these games is an incredibly detailed single player experience featuring top tier actors that will offer you tons of gameplay and enjoyment. So, why is it that the Squadron 42 is the reason that Star Citizen is taking so long? Well, to me personally, that comes down to one thing. Squadron 42 has an actual finishing point, and Star Citizen simply doesn't. Given that Squadron is a single player experience, means that no matter what happens, there has to be a finishing point, an actual end to the story, a product ready to ship that can sit on its own. And even though it might be frustrating to hear, it makes absolutely perfect sense as to why they're putting so much into Squadron 42 and its development. Star Citizen and Squadron share very similar DNA when it comes to features, gameplay, and complex systems. As we know specifically from CitizenCon 2023, many of these features intended for Star Citizen are already done and in Squadron. Item wear and tear, FPS scan, Maelstrom, the updated flight model, so many features are already set up for Squadron, and many people will ask, why in the world are they not in Star Citizen yet? That's because Star Citizen is its own beast with so many more factors and variables to consider over Squadron. When creating a single player experience, you don't need to set up these features for server meshing or over 100 different ships and vehicles. The point is that getting everything working first for Squadron is probably CIG's best course of action, even if it is a tad frustrating for us Star Citizen fans that just want some of these features to move over to the MMO side. Now, before we talk about kind of the past of CIG and these two games, we have to kind of point out one of the obvious reasons why this game is getting the spotlight, and that is the funding aspect of it. If Squadron 42 gameplay demo that is playing in the background right here is any sign of what the rest of the game is going to be like, it is very clear that it will most likely sell extremely well. The cast by itself is enough to attract a ton of players, and I can imagine that the marketing for this game will be pushed extremely heavily to gain as many players as possible. There should be a significant boost in funding once this game releases, and also a much larger interest in Star Citizen as a whole. I don't see any negatives here, honestly. The only thing that is negative is kind of the perception of Star Citizen once Squadron releases. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes, but naturally, the funding aspect of Squadron 42 is very appealing for a company like CIG, which has relied on crowdfunding for a very, very long time. Now, before we move on to some of my concerns and issues with the prioritization of Squadron and a few other thoughts, we have to discuss the past 13 years a little bit and just attempt to summarize what has gone on. The way I see it, in a very simple way, is that Star Citizen, Squadron, and CIG have simultaneously been developed from the ground up in front of our eyes for the past 13 years. The studio has gone from nothing to over 1,200 employees with multiple different offices around the globe, and the two games have gone from just a dream to a very buggy alpha E dream that has the scope to be a very amazing game. And the single player aspect looks to be, at least based off of what we're seeing in the background here, one of the coolest, most immersive experiences we have ever seen for single player games. Of course, it's completely subjective, but I mean, simply based off what we're seeing here, it looks like it could be a fantastic experience for players. And with all that comes 13 years of absolute frustration, super exciting moments, miscommunication, lack of accountability. You can name it in so many different ways. The way you can describe the past 13 years is just an absolute shit show. in a good and bad way. And without dismissing any of the frustrations that the players have had and that I have had over the past however long with CIG and this company, I do think we have to consider that, hey, what they have done has been practically impossible, at least in this industry. And to see them still succeeding to this day with what they've been doing and what they've been developing is nothing short of practically a miracle within the gaming industry. Again, that does not excuse the issues and the miscommunication and the things that they still do even to this day sometimes. But at the end of the day, I can still appreciate and respect CIG for at the very least continuing to develop this project and develop a squadron as well to their maximum potential, regardless of how long it takes. And again, that is why we're making this video. These projects have taken so long. Star Citizen has taken forever. The past few years, I see it as it's been more of a squadron prioritization thing. But again, before all of that, it has been just developing a studio with a game that is so large in scope that it's almost impossible to create. And even though we're still not there, and Squadron 42 still isn't even there yet, I think that those grueling years of frustrations and, commitments that have never been met by CIG is pretty far past us for the most part. And at the very least, we're slowly getting to that side of the story where we actually get a product and an experience. Now, coming back to reality a little bit, we have passed all the squadron talk. I still want to be very clear that Star Citizen is still getting tons of love. As a matter of fact, there are many features that are Star Citizen specific that are being developed right now. Crafting, base building, space stations, all the new social tools and whatnot, and many more are Star Citizen specific features that are being worked on behind the scenes as we speak. And whilst these features probably won't hit the verse this year, maybe some of them will, it is very clear that they're still heavily working on these features and systems. This is also partially why I think we are seeing this playability initiative for 2025. Like we talked about earlier, Squadron is going to bring a ton of interest to Star Citizen. And if Star Citizen is not in a much better place by Squadron release than it is now, CIG will be throwing away tons and tons of free marketing for the MMO side of this universe. And they cannot let that happen. That's why I personally believe Star Citizen is getting this treatment this year. By getting a polished, fun Squadron 42 out the door, players will flock over to Star Citizen in the blink of an eye. Imagine players' surprise when they find out this incredible single player also has an incredibly extensive MMO game alongside it. Now, whilst this is a positive thing for Squadron, in my opinion, I do think that this brings up a lot of concern for Star Citizen and how it could possibly play out if they don't get Star Citizen developed more. As we just talked about, Squadron is going to bring over many players to the MMO. But what if Star Citizen isn't a more filled out, enjoyable experience by then? This is, again, my biggest concern so far. The game should be closer to a beta stage in order to retain many of those players that come over from Squadron. If the game is still lacking enjoyable progression, completed gameplay loops, and stability, I just can't imagine many of those players from Squadron will want to stick around for very long. Now, of course, there is still plenty of time before we get to Squadron's release next year, but with the lack of communication about these fundamental updates for Star Citizen, it does beg the question if the game will be ready for more players when Squadron releases. The content driven playability initiative that we have this year is still really solid. And with all the features that we do need for Star Citizen, there still needs to be tons of content. But I do think it is worth noting that the features that we are waiting on are some of the most fundamental for the overall experience. And though I do think it's important to get tons of content, they do need to sit kind of side by side within this in order to create a compelling, immersive, and an enjoyable experience for players to actually come back to, especially after Squadron releases. Now, of course, we can assume that they already have a plan for this. We just probably won't hear it until CitizenCon Direct this year, which again, if you didn't hear, is going to be a virtual event, so nothing in person. But hopefully we get a Squadron release date and we get a better idea of what Star Citizen will have to offer around Squadron's release. So again, I don't expect it to be like 1.0 ready for Squadron, but I do really hope that Star Citizen is in a good place for whenever that does release. Outside of that, that's basically all I have for you today. I wanted to really dig into Squadron and why it's getting resources over sources right now and how it's pushing off development a bit more than it has in the past. But I do think it's going to be a good thing for the game overall. Again, those two games share a ton of DNA. So once Squadron is out the door, Star Citizen's development will hopefully accelerate a large amount comparatively to what we have now. And we'll get to that 1.0 point a little bit sooner whenever we get Squadron out the door. So that's about it for me. I just wanted to share some of my thoughts on Star Citizen's lengthy development time, but I would love to hear from you. How do you not only feel about the 13 long years it has been, but how do you feel about them prioritizing Squadron right now and kind of pushing that out the door and then getting Star Citizen back into a more full development? I'm pretty okay with it, but I am eagerly awaiting some more features and whatnot to Star Citizen and getting that into a better stage where it's a little bit more filled out. Other than that, though, thank you so much for being here. We will have a roadmap roundup update on Thursday, or at least I'll have my video out on Thursday. The update will be tomorrow on Wednesday. Hopefully, we get some news on what's in 4.1.1. Uh, Not sure if it'll be the biggest patch ever, but I am still excited and I will make sure to update you on that Thursday. And then following that, we will get a look at the Starlancer TAC and just kind of getting a little bit of a deep dive on the new dropship. But besides that, thank you so much for being here, sticking around to the very end. Again, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the support as of late. I'll make sure I get some more videos out for you guys too. But besides that, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.